Welcome to Fighting on Film, the War Movie Podcast. In this new weekly series, we'll be bringing you our review of Masters of the Air as each new episode drops.
Hello, welcome back to Fighting on Film and our special review series on Masters of the Air. Episode 3 is out and we'll be talking about it in a few moments. But the show has hit the general release, and it was out a few weeks ago. Everyone's seen it, or everyone who wants to see it has seen it. And you can catch up on our reviews so far on fightingonfilm.com. Episode 1 and 2 are there for your listening pleasure. And also, before we begin, don't forget you can get a huge 10% discount at checkout on airfix.com by using the code FOF Podcast. That's all capital letters, all one word, FOF Podcast.
Be rude not to.
It would be rude not to. Get some money off some lovely Airfix model kits, courtesy of Airfix. Thank you very much for that one. So I thought before we delve into episode 3, because there's quite a bit to talk about, we talk about the release of the show briefly and how we sort of have seen it, how we see it.
Well, I thought it was interesting because obviously I was in the US when it dropped, and I didn't see a great deal of mention of it. One or two people mentioned it because they knew I work on the podcast and I like war movies, but I didn't see any adverts, didn't see any real press for it. So I'm wondering what the kind of strategy for Apple is, but
yeah, it's interesting.
We've seen plenty of chatter about it on social media, though.
No, without a doubt. I've seen a couple of YouTube adverts here and there. I've seen some obviously like paid for placements on like websites. It'd be like the top thing.
Yeah,
it'd be a trailer,
stuff.
Banner ads on my Skybox. If you leave it like to just go into like sleep mode, it shows you loads of adverts for shows, and Masters of the Air comes up as like a click here to get your Apple subscription hits on now type thing.
Right.
But I think we're not in the same era, are we? When the Pacific came out, when Band of Brothers came out, advertising's changed. Streaming has come in and sort of disrupted all the sort of normalized ways of doing a show. And I think
I don't know whether there's been a lot of ads in print. I don't know whether they've been pushing it on places like TikTok or Instagram. That I haven't seen any ads on Instagram. Actually, tell a lie, I did see one about a week or so before it dropped, but that could just be the algorithm serving it up to me because of the content I follow.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting, isn't it? It's just different, isn't it? Now with streaming, it's it's on a streaming site. So if you don't necessarily follow that streaming site or don't have a subscription, sometimes these shows just pass you by. But I think word of mouth on this one and the hype around it has helped it from the ground level.
Definitely.
But that obviously that could just be the fact that we're so involved in the genre and its followers and its people that love it. They might have sort of discolored that a little bit for us. But there's so much on my socials about it, like for the last 4 or 5 days of it being out.
Lots of opinions.
A lot, some good, some bad. But that's why we love doing this, because everyone has,
and of course,
it's a subjective medium, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say. Just like film, it is a very subjective medium in that people can view things through different lenses and have a very different opinion to, someone else who watches it in, the exact same time, in the exact same, way.
Yeah, of course. It's, and we love to see it. And there's just some great moans I've seen around, like some people moaning about there not being smoking, some people moaning about wrong license plates and things. And I'm like, wow, I thought the alley tally was bad, but I didn't even pick up on the smoking thing. But obviously people would. But now it's not really something that you do. But then it seems a bit.
I mean, there is a bit of smoking in there, isn't there? But yeah, I know what they mean.
It's not something you can do.
People talking about the CGI as well, which some people had completely differing opinions on the CGI. I thought the first 2 eps, and this in particular, had some really strong sequences. I'm not going to be one of those people that is, holds something to the fire when it isn't exactly looking realistic.
Yeah.
Like you can see that they've used very detailed models and they've gone to a lot of trouble to render damage and things. But there's always going to be a limit to CGI.
Yeah. Well, that's how we do the pod. If
we watched it like 25 years ago, our minds would be blown.
Of course. Yeah.
as we grow and as we
And we're so
we
used
live
to,
with CGI,
yeah, we're
we
so
kind of
used to it.
expect more and more, don't we?
Yeah, exactly. No one picks up on Star Wars saying that the license plates is wrong, do they? Because it's,
No, the
it's
Death
not the,
Star had an out-of-date tax disc.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Um, but no, we did put out a one-word review post, so we're going to read some out
We
now, and
did.
I think it will show the sort of varied nature of how people took it. So Rob Hughes
Yep.
goes with awesome, AD Bond, grower, Chris, monumental, Nick Grubb, outstanding, Rob Shipman, flack, Adam Christiansen says underwhelming, Lance Nielsen goes with solid, Joseph Ricky, spectacular. Matt Bone of the Damcasters podcast, he says okay. Uh, Paul Burns goes with gripping. Chris Ayres went with cows. W. Rourke says uncompelling. Uh, Jamie PL says promising. And Richard S. John goes with awful, apart from the music.
Mm.
Then we had another one. Sarah Gilbert goes with disappointing. Brian Johnson says a blast. Sean Tobin, fantastic. Don McClinton, okay. Christopher Leopardi says scale. And David Miller went with dreadful. So there's a lot. We had a nearly 80
Interesting.
odd replies, and then we've got
Yeah.
quite varied, I think. Um, and I hope.
I think. Go on, sorry.
No, no, it's okay.
What I was going to say was, I think it depends on how much you expected from it on
Mm,
launch.
mm,
I saw some
yeah.
people complaining about the fact that we aren't really introduced to the characters. So, with the Band of Brothers, we had like a couple of episodes where they're training and we get to know
Mm.
everybody. And that isn't kind of the case with
It's a
with
different
Masters of the
beast.
Air. It really
It's a
is, yeah.
different beast. Like you're not following a platoon. And even
No.
the Pacific doesn't do it that way.
Well,
You don't
eh,
follow a set amount of people in
yeah, and you've
the
got to realize
Pacific.
that Bucky and Buck were both, you know, uh, been trained. They joined pre-war.
Yeah.
They were trained. They were,
Mm.
relatively senior officers, so mid
Yeah.
within
Yeah,
the group,
exactly.
kind of thing. Excuse my lack of knowledge around the command structure of
The
U.S. Army Air
USA,
Force, by the
AF,
way.
yeah.
Um, but they were, as far as I know, they were all, they were already relatively experienced and senior, and
Mm, mm.
so it's difficult to follow that kind of character. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure there would be ways, but
And
as
there's
you
so
say, it's
many
a different
bombers and there's
beast.
so many crews. It would almost be
Mm,
impossible, an impossible task to really delve into the depths of someone's character too much, because then people will be complaining that you're not seeing enough of others. So
yeah.
I kind of think you get enough. I mean, I thought it was absolutely fine. I like being thrown in at the deep end of a show and having
Mm,
to work it out myself. Like, I'll reference sort of Star Trek The Next Generation, where you start at episode one and you're made aware by the show that these people have been serving with each other for quite some time, and only by watching the show do you learn little bits about them every week. And this is kind of the same thing, where
yeah.
they're not necessarily giving you a lot of lore or background to the character, but they are giving you enough of their perception of the world around them that's happening. And you get this in episode three. So I think you get more of that in episode three, at least near the end with Cleven and Buck. So I think maybe we should jump in to episode three and talk about what happened, because I mean, it's a rip roarer for me. I adore
Yeah.
this episode. I think
Action heavy for sure.
it's very action heavy, but it's the way that it does it. So I'll kick us off by saying it's this episode is a raid. It's
Hmm.
90%, 80% a raid. And the raid, the target for today is it's a maximum effort raid on the Messerschmitt engine assembly plant of Regensburg and the ball bearing factory in Schweinfurt, with 365 bombers and 240 fighters, the largest air armada put together at that time in the war
Yeah.
by the 8th Bomb Group. Um,
I
it
like the line at the beginning of the episode where he says maximum effort a couple of like 8 months ago had been what,
was
like
12
12 forts
bombers,
or
yeah.
something. Yeah.
And it's just the scale, like, and this is the thing, we don't often allow ourselves to talk about it because we're not a history pod. We're a film show first that covers historical topics, not a historical
Yeah.
topic thing about film. That's how we see the show. But just the insanity of, like, the war material, the amount of
Mm. the
things, the
scale
amount
and the
of
capability.
aircraft that,
Mm,
that the Allies were putting into the air in 1943 is just, I can't comprehend it. Like it's incredible to me that you can put that many aircraft in the air, that many men, and the amount of air crew and people that work to put them in the air, to me just, it's incredible.
absolutely.
And to the guys at the time, that's becoming normal as well.
Mm,
Like it's insane. And that's why I love history so much, because you're just sitting there going, wow, this happened. This is
yeah.
real. Is it,
It's always
it's
staggering
staggering.
what
That's the word.
what humans are capable of
Mm,
achieving, when
mm.
there's a need for it.
Yeah, it
And
really, really
sadly,
is.
like most often that need is driven by conflict. But,
Yeah,
you know, just before we actually dive into our thoughts on the show, a bit of production side of things. This is the
sure.
third episode directed by Cary Fukunaga. He directed the previous two as well.
Hmm.
And then we get a lot more of the on-set visual virtual production, which we'll talk about later on
Yes,
a little bit, I
yes.
think. And noteworthy are the number of M2 Brownings we see in this, because
Heck
it's
of a
one of
lot.
the main featured aspects within the raid of the forts defending themselves. So I saw a post by one of the armorers that worked on the show from Bapti. He posted on his Instagram, and he said that they supplied 12 M2 Brownings, 8 aircraft variants, 3 heavy barrel variants, and 1 water cooled. 50 M1 Garands, 10 M1 carbines, 10 1911s, 50 K98Ks, 20 MP40s, 50 Mosin Nagant rifles, 20 PPSH 41s, and various Volksturm weapons.
Wow.
So he was
Yeah.
just talking a little bit about all the various
Mm.
things that Bapti put into the show. And this is the show where we see most of those, 12 Brownings
Oh yeah.
in a lot of those shots. So I thought it was
Mm.
worth mentioning that before we
No,
kick
yeah.
off.
Yeah, wow. And obviously, you know, mentioning what Bapti have supplied there gives you an insight into what might be coming up. Um, so, do stay tuned to Master of the Air to learn more about why some of those weapons are in there. They're flying over the target. It's a long old flight. It's about 5 hours there. And then
Mm,
they're told you're going down to Africa after. And they'll be waiting for you with cold beers and all the, a nice little welcome party. And all the guys are sitting there going, got to fly to Africa? Like,
yeah.
okay. They all just sort of
So
take it on
I
the
tried to
chin.
find out how far that would be, and I don't know whether they actually mention it in the
I don't think they do.
briefing scene, because they show the map and they show
Mm.
the flight to Regensburg and then straight down to Algeria. So I jumped on Google Maps and did like a measure distance, just like as the crow
Yeah.
flies,
Yeah.
and from Regensburg to Telegama, I think that's how it's pronounced in Algeria. It's 1,500 kilometers.
Wow.
Yeah,
In a bomber that was
wild, isn't it?
mid 30s bomber. It's insane.
Yeah,
It's insane to me. Like, wow. And it happened, which is even, it's even more crazy. They did it. I think the main thing for me is this episode, the scale and the detail of this raid
mm,
is possibly one of the best to date, one of the best raid scenes I've seen in any modern recreation. It's up there with the raid and appointment in London for scale. And obviously,
hmm
what they're doing in 1953, if what they have is still to me remarkable and amazing. It's one of the best parts of that movie. But the whole of Raid Appointment in London is fantastic. But the raid in that is very, very well done. But this is just every single penny, every single piece of press release you've read, everything in the trailers, all that hyping that was doing it. This is what I think the Masters of the Air that was promised. I think this is what they wanted to show, but you're not going to do it in the first episode. Obviously, you're going to build to it,
yeah.
and
No,
it just
absolutely. You can
mm,
feel that progression. We get a little
really
bit of it in the
can.
first and second episodes, and then this is really showing. Well, again, if you follow the 100th, they have this series of raids where it does become extremely costly for them,
Yeah,
and the scale of these raids are huge.
yeah,
So the progression of it works in well for the plot in terms of
mm,
it ramps. Um, if a bit of background, if you're not familiar with the Regensburg raid, it's like the aim was to disperse German fighter coverage. So
yes,
they'd have two groups. One would go in and attack the Regensburg uh, target, and then the second will go after the ball bearing manufacturing plant. Um, and that would hopefully disperse the fighter coverage and make it a little bit easier for the two groups to attack the various targets. And
Mm.
then they'd, hoodwink the Luftwaffe by then flying south essentially rather than
Yeah.
back the way they came.
And
So
then there
that
would be
the Germans would send up
diversionary
fighters up to like,
raids on top.
yeah,
Yeah.
they'd send fighters up waiting for them, and they'd be going in a completely different direction.
Mm.
Um, but of course, in the show, it really nicely depicts the issue with that. So like a whole, about half of the raid was stuck on the ground because of weather issues, because they're taking off from various different bases in the UK.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
there's thick fog, and I really like the way that the tension and the delay
It does
kind of
build.
builds. I thought the
Yeah.
build up was really good.
I like that. It's good. And they're all sort of sitting in their bombers waiting and having talks and
Yeah,
things. And
passing the time in different
yeah,
ways and
but
chatting.
baby facing his crew talking about, oh, there must be a cow. There's a
Hmm.
cow on the what if there's a cow on the runway? What do we do? And then the big chap goes, peanut butter, jelly. And he's like, I'll turn you a cow to ground beef. Great
Yeah.
line. And I love how that crew, it shows the youth of these lads.
Does.
They're so young, they're so naive, they're so eager to do their bit. And it's just so tragic what happens to Alice from Dallas.
Yeah.
When I saw it first a couple of months ago now, but I've seen it a few times since then. But that scene where he's trying to get Babyface out of the bull turret is just gut
Yeah.
wrenching. It's
Yeah, it really is.
it's frantic. It's chock full of tension. You know, even down to the pressure of the inside of the ship as it's going down, and you've got
Mm.
his mate trying to help him, but he's been thrown across around it like it,
And the
like
sound of
a
the empty cartridge cases like rolling backwards and forwards
rattling
inside the
around and
fuselage.
things falling out of falling down and stuff. It's just it's an amazing tiny piece of carnage in the air
I
with
mean, the
everything
whole
going on
sequence
around it.
is very good.
It's beautiful.
I don't want to be too gushing, but I was struck by it.
Mm,
The aviation sort of sequences of that raid of where they're trying to defend against
yeah,
the Luftwaffe are they're really good. They really
they
are.
just
Like,
are. This is all of that, all of those CGI teams coming together
well,
and
yeah,
just
we talked about them all last week, didn't
yeah,
we?
and
Like a dozen
making
different
yeah,
like effects houses coming together
exactly.
to
And they
put
just
sequences together.
and they have this beautiful sequence where time slows and you see out of the cockpit of
Yes.
Buck's plane and the carnage of Messerschmitts buzzing around them and all the bombers firing back with their 15 or 13 50 caliber machine guns. It's just it's a visual, like it's a treat. There's stuff going on
It is.
everywhere.
Well, you got it's frenetic. So it ramps and it builds. They get
Mm,
strafed, then they get attacked, and then they're on their own. And then there's rockets coming in. There's fighters strafing them with machine gun fire,
yeah,
and then you get that freneticness of the sequence. But then I thought that the short bit where they slow it down from it's kind of like Crosby and Kleben's
yeah.
point of view. So like they're looking out the
Oh,
cockpit, they're
sorry.
looking out
Yeah,
the
that is their bomber. Yeah,
yeah,
sorry. Yeah,
but it's all of them at that point,
yeah. Of
isn't it, really?
course. Yeah,
But they're looking out of that and it slows down and you see like one foot's like falling on itself. There's
yeah,
parachutes, there's rockets coming in, there's fighters going left and right, there's tracer fire everywhere. And then there's that one guy that kind of like no parachute, nothing. He just flies past the cockpit and then you see it pan and he whips off the wing and gets decapitated.
yeah. And that for me is it always Master of the Airs does this thing for me where it always finds a way, and all of obviously written this in, but it finds a way to bring back the human cost of
Yeah,
this.
I always think of like the air war as being a relatively clean because it's machines fighting
It's
machines, but
machines
it's the
against
people
machines.
inside the machines. And this is
Yeah.
the first, well, almost the second, because we talked last week about how, that crew was consumed by fire in the
Mm,
explosion. That was a very
mm,
striking scene. In this one, we get a little bit more of that, like someone's leg gets blown off.
mm.
In Kurt's B-17, his co-pilot's wounded, gets
Yeah.
like his jaw shot away,
Yeah.
kind of thing. So you get much more of that, bloody
Mm,
physical side of
mm.
it.
Yeah.
Becomes more
Talking
visceral.
about it is very visceral, and it really grounds it in reality for the viewer. And talking about Bidis, unfortunately. if you've seen the episode, if you haven't, sorry, spoilers if you're listening. He rides his luck too much, and he finally hits the deck in a ball of fire and perishes. And it's again, the show is showing the cost of
I
it.
really, yeah, I like the way Barry Keoghan kind of like sells that at the end, where
Really
he's trying to
does.
keep the nose up. They clip through some trees, and then he just has this moment of where it goes very quiet, and then he just goes, "Oh God,"
Yeah,
and
knows
then they
he's in
plow
a
into the
dive
ground.
he can't come
Yeah,
out of. It's
yeah,
yeah,
he
yeah,
can't do anything about it.
I know. And equally as well, I mean, maybe they obviously they couldn't have planned for it, but his star is shining so bright now. To
Yeah,
have him killed off, I
and after
think
Saltburn, etc.
is going to
Totally.
be very shocking unless you know the story of Biddick himself. Um, Biddick, sorry, unless you know Biddick and his
Mm,
story, it's going to be a shock to some, I think. And this is what the show does: is it grounds it in human cost, and as we go along, you will see more of that. Um,
mm,
not just it's again, it's everything about being in that bomber is dangerous yet again, and it shows you it. And I, it's it this as this episode just for me just cements the show as being something very
yeah,
good that we should be enjoying and appreciating for what it's trying to do. Yes, it might not be getting everything 100% right for everybody. Yes, last week the RAS stuff's going to rankle with a lot of Brits, and it has, but the show is doing something more. I'm wording this badly, but the show is trying to tell you something. And this episode,
yeah.
for me, it all works. It all falls into place. Um,
Mm.
I'm gushing a lot. Sorry. I really do love this episode. I'll talk about it in final thoughts more. Um, but at the end of the raid, you get this amazing, the tension doesn't stop. So you've got Buck's aircraft is shot to bits. You know, they're having to
Mm.
feather their engines. They've
And
got
they throw
injured
everything
on board,
overboard.
throw everything overboard. That's a great
Yeah.
scene. You see how
Like the
fragile
ball
the thing
turret
is.
gets dropped out and
Yeah,
the
it's
gun
lovely.
sights and the guns and they
Mm,
drop almost everything out there. And it's a really good sequence. And as you say, it illustrates that lack of protection because
yeah.
there's so many holes in the aircraft.
You see it when there's
And
that beautiful shot of it finally gliding down and the sun glints through it and you get
yeah,
all the sunlight through the holes. And I'm like, this is a machine full of people. Like, and it's
yeah.
taken this battering. It's,
How are
when
you
you see,
alive?
exactly. When you see that famous photo of the Wellington that took a hammering,
Mm,
and you think to yourself, people got up in that, went through absolute hell, and they came back,
I
and the plane was still flyable. It beggars belief to me.
yeah,
This
I know.
happens. It happened. It's again,
Well, in reality, I found some figures. I hope they're correct, but 24 bombers were lost, and then more than 60 of the 120 survivors that landed in North Africa had suffered battle damage.
wow, amazing. And
Mm,
in the show, they say, 11 of Buck's 21 bombers return,
yeah,
and that's 50% loss almost.
yeah.
And they don't call them the bloody hundredth for nothing. These guys took a hammering, um, but they were very brave lads
For
for doing it.
for this episode, I found a diagram illustrating all of the bailout points for the 13
Yeah,
crew or the 10 crew
Matt will
rather.
share that on the socials when this episode drops
Yeah, yeah,
because it's
it's
incredible.
absolutely amazing. It shows like three possible routes for each person,
Yeah.
or like the order in which they would bail and that kind of
Mm.
thing, and what kind of position they would get out of. And I think, just to get back to the ball turret, because we have to talk about Babyface's death. Like his
Tragic.
only like way of getting out of the aircraft is out of the ball turret, which he struggles to do and he can't do it.
So it
And
locks,
then
doesn't it?
to
The
jump out,
hatch.
yeah, the hydraulics are like
Mm.
jammed or some such. And his method of exit is basically out of a rear hatch on the left hand side of the fuselage,
Right.
which is just in front of the real rear tail gunner's
Mm.
position.
Mm.
And he definitely has like the hardest egress method.
Yeah.
It's
Well, they
when you
say
look
that,
at
don't
this
they?
diagram,
The
it's
ball gunner is
incredible.
it's the most one of the most dangerous parts of being a B-17 crewman because it's
Absolutely, yeah.
you know, and then to see how
But
easy it could be detached from the plane as well with
I know, yeah,
just a lever.
when they
Yeah,
dump
I never knew that.
the
I
turret
never knew
itself,
they could
I
be
didn't
dumped
know
that
either.
easily. Yeah, and
No,
that's another thing about the detail. So, just quickly touch on that. I mean, I talked about it earlier, but that scene with Babyface is It's heart-wrenching. It's gut-wrenching. It really is.
Mm.
Because there's nothing he can do.
The desperation and then the
Yeah.
guilt of having to
Mm,
leave him as well.
It comes up later on, actually.
Yes,
You don't just, and obviously
we won't talk about that
his
yet,
friend
but
does land in Belgium.
mhm.
And then at the end of the episode, with the next time part, they do allude to more
Yeah,
of them coming back to what happened in the plane. But it dealt with really well for me. And there's no, because you can't do it, because obviously you're in the air, you've seen a bomber go down. The guys in the bomber don't know what happened to their friend. They won't know that yet.
no,
So the show doesn't dwell on it. A lesser writer would have had someone go, "Oh, Biddick, no," like they would have done something like that. But this show
yeah.
understands that they're still got to get the bomber home, and the
Mm.
pilot and the co-pilot is responsible for everyone in their bomber fortress getting home. They
There's
don't dwell on it.
no, they don't. There's this little sequence with Cross, where he's trying to remember when a particular fort went down,
Yep.
and the bombardier like turns to him like, I don't think there's a navigator in the wing that was like keeping his log together at that point
Yeah.
because everyone's on the guns.
Yeah. And he's like,
And
just call it 11 o'clock
yeah,
to sort of,
and you can see Crosby's kind of like, I really want to get this down because it's important,
yeah,
but you just there's no way of knowing. Like there's
no.
too much going on.
Mm. It shows how hectic that is. So I think maybe we should
Mm.
quickly do a quick alley tally, and then we're into final thoughts. Pilot the Bombardier. Did you know you can join the Fighting on Film Patreon for as little as £2.50 per month, which includes a vote in the Patreon pick, exclusive podcast news, guest announcements, and a hell of a whole lot more. Now let's get this baby home.
I think for me this week, the coolest thing out of the alley tally was quite possibly the bit where a guy's like cocking handle, charging handle on his 50s like
I've
shot
got
away,
that
and he
as mine as
grabs.
well.
It's brilliant inclusion. Like the
It's
armor
very
has
cool.
obviously gone. I've got something.
I've got something for you
Grabs
here.
the cartridge
Yeah.
case, like jams it into the broken off handle, and uses it to rack the actual
That's very alley. That is the
bolt back.
definition
Really
of
good.
alley. Very,
Yeah.
very alley. No, I really enjoyed it. And there's little details in there that I noticed this week. Like one of the co-pilots, I think it might be Buck's co-pilot's got this really nice,
Mm.
like sort of paisley checkered scarf on.
Oh yeah,
Nice
yeah,
little bit of characterization there. Um, Again, just the sheer amount of, you mentioned it earlier, but the sheer amount of 50 cals going off and just shows me again how finite of amount of time you've got to defend your bomber where you're firing. I'll link it on the Twitter, the X account. There's a amazing waist gunnery film made by Warner Brothers in
mm.
1943 or 44, I think, voiced by, there's this character. He's wearing like a sort of this mythical sort of turban-y thing, and it's like, oh, firing like at a plane is like magic. You got to get it right. And the guy goes, actually, there's a voiceover, and it's like, actually, it's a lot more complicated than that because there's angles, there's everything else, and you've got this sort of like not dumb, but this sort of like well-meaning but eager cartoon waist gunner voiced by Mel Blanc, voice of Bugs Bunny, which is fantastic.
Yeah,
Sort of learning how to do waist gunnery, and it in that you see the skill of doing it. But then when you're in
yeah.
combat, the
Training how to
fan,
lead and stuff.
yeah, exactly. But in combat, you've got this tiny little window, and you maybe have like 3 or 4 seconds to loosen
Oh,
off a
you
shot.
you get a good feel of that. And we talked about this like when we first watched the series in December. There was a couple of sequences where we're like, they're really not leading a lot
Mm,
in this, and we kind of debated whether that was intentional, whether it was the gunners not giving enough lead to an aircraft and missing, or whether it
mm.
was something where the FX team have, they've kind of
Keyed
put the
it.
plane too far forward for not
But I
leading
think
it,
I
that kind of
think it's
thing.
that human aspect. You can do all the training in the world, you can do all the gunnery on the ground, but there's nothing like the real thing. And once you're in it, I do think you might just
Leading a target is
loose off a
hard. It's
burst.
a real
Yeah,
skill.
exactly.
It's
Yeah.
kind of, if you've ever done
Mm,
like clay shooting or something like that,
mm,
it has to be almost intuitive. There's
yeah.
no everything is moving too quickly for you to calculate that with,
Yeah.
need to be like three plane lengths in front of that, but
That's
your
it.
brain kind of just calculates you
Mm,
need to be this far ahead of the clay because I've
that's
never
it.
shot a plane down
No,
with a
no,
50
no.
cal,
But
you
you
know.
could make a clay big enough to be
But
a
it's a
plane, I guess. Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah, it makes
But
me really want.
they used clay shooting in both World War
Yeah.
One and World War Two to
Mm,
train fighter pilots and gunners in lead.
mm,
Just the concept of it.
I'm writing a piece about that for my new job, actually, gunnery,
Yeah.
bomber gunnery. So look out for that when it drops.
Mm, it's gonna be good.
Um, there's a game that it makes me yearn to play again. From my youth called B-17 Air Gunner. Do you remember that
Oof,
one?
yeah, I do.
It makes me want to play that. I just it's just so interesting. Bomber gunnery is just really interesting to me. But yeah, I've also got um just the amount of battering these B-17s can
Mm.
take and still be in the air. It just staggers me, you know. And then obviously from the show, you've gone away, done my own little bits of bobs and pictures and research. It's just I say it every week. I'm going to say every week. I can't fathom how these things came back. Like
No, I know.
it's incredible. It's just incredible. And no, some great. If you're a fan of 50 cows going off, this episode's for you. It really is.
Yeah,
Um,
this is kind of the pinnacle of 50 cal action
yeah, I think it
in the
is.
show, isn't
I
it?
think it is.
For me, the other thing that stood out in terms of Ali was the German use of rockets. Like there's a couple of
Yeah, that's
sequences
rare to see.
where the guys like shout, "There's rockets coming in," and you see them zip in. And we saw them in the trailer, and there's lots of debate about them because they look like they were almost guided. Um,
Like the
I did a
Fritz
bit of
bomb.
research.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Fritz bomb and all. I did a bit of research, and like it could have been like a Rochdale X4. They came in 44, however, and they
Okay.
were really interesting. They were almost like tracked vibration. Once they got near to a vibration,
Oh
they would
wow.
detonate. It's kind of cool.
A bit of
Um,
Wunderwaffe there for everyone.
right, exactly. Or they could have been R4Ms, but they came in 44. So I guess in this raid, which is I think late summer 43,
Yeah.
they're more likely to be something like a BR-21, which is just a rocket that was fired.
Yeah.
But super interesting inclusion
Mm.
because it's, again, air-to-air rocketry is not something you think about
And I always think the
immediately.
Luftwaffe are shortchanged anyway in media. Um, but it's nice to see them include it, which is nice.
Mm.
Um, yeah. So moving on to final thoughts this week for episode 3 of Masters of the Air. Do you want to go first? Because I'm gonna gush away in a minute. Do you want to
Are
go
you?
first? Yeah, I really am.
We're going to be accused of being shills at this rate.
If you like something,
So
you like it. You can't help
I
it.
know,
We
I
said at the
know.
start, folks, it's subjective. These are our
Yeah, it
opinions.
is,
If
and
you disagree, that's
we're not being
absolutely
paid to do
fine.
this,
No, of
so it's
course. No, no,
fine.
no, no.
For me, this feels like the center point of the series. Having watched all of it, and I know it's only episode 3, but this feels like it's on a real sort of upward trajectory, and it's at
Mm,
a bit of a turning point, bit of a centerpiece for the show. And it's kind of the longest continuous aerial sequence we get
yeah,
within the show.
yeah,
I would
yeah.
say there's plenty more to come, but
Oh, there is
like
tons more. There's
this
tons
is
more.
the
Yeah,
one episode that really focuses in almost entirely on a raid, from start to finish. And I found it's not really a final thought, but I found a quote from someone that was part of the raid, in reality.
oh wow.
It's a hell of a quote from a surviving airman. I learned firsthand that a person can come to terms with the fact of their own death without panicking. And
Yeah,
that's the experience of someone that was on the raid.
that's
Um,
highly reflected in the episode, I think, as
and
well.
yeah, that's what I thought. And
Mm,
you kind of get that. I really liked actually some of the sequences with Cleven where he's holding that crew together and he's like, no, we're not going to bail out. We're going to see this through.
yeah.
And, he manages to
You
get it
mean
all the way
Buck?
to North
Sorry.
Africa.
Yeah,
Yeah, Cleven.
Cleven. Sorry. Yeah, the Buck and Bucky get confused. I get confused every week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Austin Butler's character.
Yes, that's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
he does. Butler in this episode's so good. Like, I hope he gets all his flowers for this because, as I mentioned, going into it, I hadn't seen him in a lot, but now I'm a Butler stan. We stand for Butler. He's great. Really, really is. So I'll say I genuinely think, and I've said it to a few others who've been chatting to about this. I think it's possibly the best hour of television I've seen in the last 5 years.
Yeah, you did say that on first watch as well,
Yeah,
actually.
and that was my gut reaction, and I still believe
Yeah.
it now. And I've watched this episode maybe 3, 4 times because I love it so much. I think it's a
I'd love to see
masterpiece.
this on a big screen, actually.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I got the screener app to work on my smart telly, so I watched it on my big
Yeah,
40-inch
I'd like to see it
TV,
on like an
and
actual big screen.
it still floors me. I'd love to see this on IMAX. It's just, oh, it would
Hmm.
be incredible. It's just, as I said earlier, everything about what we learned about Masters of the Air going in, what we had like any sort of conceptions in my brain of these great massive scale raids, just it comes. This is the episode for it. Like
Yeah,
the scale floored me. The way they deal with the crashing and the deaths is just so well done. I think it's quite respectful, and it doesn't dwell on things. There's no cliche that I could feel. You at the end of the show, you get some good foreshadowing with Bucky and Buck, where he's like, "Look, we're going to get through this," and Buck goes, "Sure, yeah, okay," and you can see the toll on him. You can see the toll on the captain that it has, the pilot, that it really this has weathered him. This has changed him as a person. This whole experience, and going forward now, that's a great piece of grounding for the characters. Everyone now has been that they've been they've had their trial by fire. So they know
yeah,
now going forward this is what it's going to be like. You know, if the scrub raid was one thing and the raid over the U-boat pens was another, the high this is like the high watermark for going forward. And I just think it's great. And as I've written down here in my notes, this is the episode that I hope turns people onto it that may have had issues with episode 1 and 2. I really hope this is the episode that people get behind and go, actually, I get it now. I really do, because I just, I'm going to bang on about it all year, essentially. If someone mentions Master of the Air to me, I'm like, what did you think of episode 3? Please tell me you thought it was fantastic. And if you don't agree with me, that's absolutely fine. But I just, something in me just was ignited with this one.
mm.
I think it's fantastic. You know, it's I think it's a masterpiece. I really do.
Well, there you
I,
go.
I can't, I can't give it enough flowers. I know I'm probably going to annoy some by just constantly like singing its praises and not picking out anything negative. I can't, like, I just can't. Like I just think it's fantastic. Again, I really hope people like this episode because everything about it was fucking great.
Well, we'll see next week. We'll do another one-word review for
Sure.
episode 3, and we'll see what the reaction for everyone else was. Be really interesting to find out. And
Yeah.
I enjoyed it too. I mean, I don't want to shill too hard because Rob's already done that, but I will reiterate that we aren't being
Oh,
paid
my
by
Apple
Apple.
TV money, my checks just come. No, no, I'm joking. No, not at all. No, 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 no.
Rob is recording this from a brand new iMac.
I wish.
I know, right? No, but I agree. It is. You were a couple of episodes ahead of me because you were like, yes, we got the screen and
I
I'm watching
charged
it right
ahead.
now.
I couldn't help
You
myself.
did, and like you were like, this is the best hour of TV I've watched in years. And I was like, okay, cool, right, I'll look forward to that. Finally caught up with him, and I was like,
I was
okay,
talking
yeah.
to We Have Ways' Al Murray about it as well. I said the same thing. I couldn't help it.
So yeah, I think that rounds us out for this
I
week.
think it does.
And we'll be back again next week when the next episode of Masters of the Air drops with our thoughts immediately as the show drops.
Yeah.
Hope you guys are enjoying this sort of mini series as we follow along with Apple's new show.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And do stick around for the regular Wednesday episodes of Fighting on Film, because hot on the heels of us recording this episode, we will have talked to and interviewed Dale Dye, the legendary military advisor, about his work on the show, and that's going out as a special on Wednesday. So we will be out by the time you listen to episode 4. So please do join us again for that one. And if you're listening out of sequence, go and listen to it. It's there now. Look, it's there in your Apple podcast things. Hit play now.
or any other podcast platform that you're on.
Yeah, other podcast platforms are available.
Yes.
Yet again, thanks for joining us for these special Masters of the Air reviews. We hope you're enjoying it just as much as we are. And do follow us on the socials. Drop us a review, drop us a comment, let us know what you think. We'll catch you again next time for another Masters of the Air review. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye bye.
Bye.